Good morning, everyone. Hi. Welcome to our third stand-up. Yesterday we didn't have any problems. Hopefully we won't have any problems now. By the way, I'm Michael from Pixeesoft. Thank you for tuning in. And let's get right into the core, why we're here, which is the stand-up. All right, so here is our Scrum board. A lot of things have moved to done. Yesterday we talked about creating the container for the billing service or deploying the billing service and whatnot. That there were certain things we needed to pivot, and we identified the five to six methods, functions that were being called on the billing service, and how do we go about solving that, because the billing service was too tightly coupled to the internal CRM systems. So we needed to pivot, and we identified that, okay, let's do it as a Node.js. Let's do it as a Node.js application. Let's just mock those endpoints, and let's see where it takes us from there. So as you can see on the board, a few things have been done. So what happened? Well, there were certain problems along the way. One major problem that I identified was that the in-house PHP framework has a lot of functions under the hood. It can do not only JSON encoding, but also XML encoding, but also SOAP. It can also do plain text, just plain text encoding that is hidden behind a PHP encoding, which literally means that you will receive a true or false, and it will come just as plain text, and the PHP framework will attempt to parse it and just make a PHP object out of it. Frankly, it was a lot of digging, like, where does it go? And it was peeling layers of onion and trying to identify how or what is the actual format of the request. What does it look like? How does it work? What does it do? What does it return? How does it even work? That's the problem when you have an in-house framework that doesn't have a comprehensive documentation, and then someone has to maintain it or someone has to make a modification. And you're like, I have no idea how this operates. I have no idea how this behaves. And frankly, it was quite a pain. I had to call quite a few people to be like, do you know what's going on? And usually they were like, no, we don't know what's going on. So that was an obstacle. Also, this billing service is being called by two other services. Now, the problem is that one service calls it as plain text and the other one calls it as JSON. So what do we do? Well, you have to basically implement it twice, even the mock itself, crazy stuff. Anyway, so I went for the Node.js mock service. I created those functions, 6 of them. Thank goodness that you can create a wildcard for the URL. So if you do an Express app and you put a URL, or you put your server that listens on certain URL, you can then build the path. And each of the parameters can be it can be read as a wildcard. So you just put a colon in front of it and say type, and then there can be anything. There can be anything you want. There can be whatever, a string, a number, whatever, and you can then read it in the code. What's good is that it works as pattern matching. So whatever you put in there, you receive it at that endpoint. And that's a good thing, because I couldn't figure out what the URL is actually supposed to look like. So that's good. I can identify what's coming in, log it, and then make it exactly the way it's meant to be. So that was the main thing. So basically 6 functions, Node.js, wildcard works fine. And I deployed it in a Google Cloud run, which was quite easy. It was quite straightforward. There are just couple things that were lessons learned. So first thing was, if you create a Node.js Docker container just by itself, just like node:10, the image is quite big. It ended up being 1 gigabyte, which is kind of funny. because it's just one file, app.ts, well, if compiled in JS. 1 GB for one function, it's kind of heavy, but you can reduce it by changing the size of the container. You can create create an image that uses the Alpine Node.js image, which is way smaller. That's like down to, I don't know, 150 megabytes or even less, 70 megabytes. And then the second step is to create an npm install, but -- production, so that you don't get all of the debug tools baked into your image. So that was one thing, just getting over the size. I was always amazed how Java containers were huge, and then I saw Node.js image having 1 GB. I was like, oh my God, it's too huge. Anyway, after this, when you want to deploy it to Cloud Run, you just have to make sure that you specify a port and the IP address where the server is meant to be running. So inside of your function, you need to define that it listens on 0.0.0.0, all of the interfaces, because localhost 127.0.0.1 is not permitted in Google Cloud Run. Also, it's not permitted to use any port you want. You have to use 8080 and expose that one so that Cloud Run can map right onto it. And then Cloud Run deploys it on HTTPS and port 443, obviously the default port for HTTPS, but it gives you a URL and it gives you the SSL for free. So that's pretty good. So in fact, I wrote the functions, I created a Docker container, I deployed it, it's behind SSL, it's great, right? Well, not yet, because I don't know if the other services will communicate with it exactly the way I imagined. So we'll just have to put that as a technical debt, or we'll have to put it as next thing to be done. And we'll see, we'll have to test it in production to identify if it's working. All right, and moving on to today's work, right? Because it's a stand-up, so we should say what we're going to talk about, what we're going to work on today. Well, I can see that there's a create Git repository. That's a small and easy win, as you would say, a low-hanging fruit. Go for it, just create a Git repository, create a README, push it into Bitbucket repo, and hopefully everything will be fine. So that one is quite straightforward. And then either deploy auth service or create a database for the API service. Probably create a database. It's also quite an easy win. We'll see, but the auth service has to be deployed sooner or later. Since it's a PHP app as a script, it could be deployed using the Cloud Run as well. No, I think I'm just gonna stick with Kubernetes. Okay, so we'll create the database today, create the Git repository, and then perhaps if there's time, I'll start working on the container for the API service, most likely. I think that's about it for that. Let's see if there's any message in the chat. Doesn't look like it. So, as we always talk about, stand-ups being short and to the point, I think that's about it. Thank you for watching. Anyone who tuned in to watch, check our other accounts on other social media, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever works for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.